And greetings YouTube gamers, welcome to another episode of Retro Raider. My name is Johnny Retro and welcome to the channel. So this is going to be another video game memories episode, but it's going to be very different from the stuff that I've done in the past. Usually on this segment of the channel, I talk about, video game memories. Memories from video games that I grew up with, or games that I rediscovered and made me go back in time to my early days as a gamer. But today I'm going to bring you guys something completely different. I'm going to share a story with you guys. A real story. My story. I'm going to tell you the very first time that I've played a video game. The time where I lost my gaming virginity, if you will. It sounds a little bit weird. But yeah. And by the way, if you're new on the channel, feel free to subscribe and watch a couple of my older videos. So sit back, relax, and listen to my story right after this. I guess that I was 5 years old, so this was way back in 1993, and this was probably during a weekend because I didn't went to the kindergarten that day, and my parents weren't working on that day, so probably during a weekend. Anyhow, we went to a birthday party of one of my parents' friends. So we got there for lunch, and I was the only kid there. And it is not that I was a very sociable kid, with other kids, and I didn't have any toys with me, so it was pretty much just me, a slice of cake, and a bunch of grown-ups. And my parents' friend, she had a younger brother, but a younger brother that was much more older than me. I guess that he was 18 years old, around that, and probably he knew how to handle with kids. So he saw me on the living room, bored to death, eating the fucking cake. He approached me and said, "Well, kid, come to my room, I will show you something cool that we can play." So we got to his room, and I remembered that he had this computer desk, but he didn't have a computer there. He had a television, this old school CRT TV, and on the tray of the desk, the tray where you usually put the keyboard, he had this machine right here, a Sega Mega Drive Model 2. Now at this point, I need to put you guys into context. I didn't know nothing about video games. My parents weren't gamers. I was only child. I didn't have any siblings, older brothers that could show me this stuff, and my parents were just not into video games. I know that my father played a little bit of ZX Spectrum back in the day because his sister, my aunt, she had one. And my mother was actually a big fan of pinball machines. She still is. So I guess that they probably went to the arcades a couple of times. But the point is that it was just not their thing. And at the point, early 90s, it was very unusual to have computers at our place. Kids nowadays, when you're born, you already have a computer at your home. You already have access to the internet, but that was not the reality back then. At least it was not my reality. So I didn't know anything about it, computer games, video game consoles, even a Game Boy. So back to our story. So this guy, he shows me this machine, and I remember that he had a couple of drawers next to the desk. And in one of the drawers, he pulls this game out. Mega Games 2 for the Sega Mega Drive. He takes the cartridge and he slides the cartridge on the system. Then he grabs the controller just like this and fires up the machine. Now at this point, guys, taking into account that I knew nothing about video games, what I thought that this was some kind of a weird VHS tape recorder or something like that. I thought that we were going to watch a cartoon or a movie. Then on the title screen, when you're supposed to pick the game, he asked me, "What do you want to play?" And I was like, "Well, what do you mean? Play what?" Then he fires up Streets of Rage. I remember the initial screen on Streets of Rage, with the background of the story. And I was 5 years old. I didn't know how to read. Even less how to read English. And I was like, yeah, this is some kind of a weird cartoon. Then on the character select screen, he asked me to pick up a character. And I remember, I picked Adam. I thought that Adam just looked badass. Then the game starts, stage 1, and he pauses the game. He pauses the game and tell me that, well, you use this to move the character, you press here to jump, you press here to kick and punch, and press here to call the cops and blow everything. And before he leaves the room, he told me, let me know if you need anything. And I was like, okay, I think that I can pull this out. So I start playing, and at this point, I still thought that this was a cartoonish movie, but a cartoon where I was a part of it. I was controlling a character in a story. Then, after a couple of enemy waves and dying a lot, I reached the boss. And I died, of course. I lost all of the credits. So I call him for help, and he explained me how to reset the whole thing, how to start it from scratch. And I told him, well, there's this big guy on the game that I can't beat it. Then he grabs another controller, and on the character select screen, I choose Adam again, and he chooses Axel. And this totally blew me away, because now there were 2 characters on the screen. We were playing in co-op. I was one character, he was the other character. And of course that the guy, he was very good at the game, much better than me, of course. So we reached the boss again, and for you guys that know Streets of Rage, if you're playing in co-op, there's 2 bosses at the end of the stage. We kick the bosses, and hooray! Then he told me, well, this is the next level. And I was like, there's more? He told me, yeah, there's a lot of levels, a lot of enemies, bosses. Cool. And we kept playing and playing and playing. After a couple of rounds, I think that we got up to probably the 5th stage or something like that. He asked me, well, do you want to play something else? And I was, yeah, sure. And I was looking at the cover, and I asked him, well, what is this ninja dude right here? And he said, well, we can play that one. Then he fires up The Revenge of Shinobi. And this was so cool. I mean, it was another adventure, another character, another environment, pretty much another game. And I was mesmerized about the whole thing. Then I asked him to show me his other games. He had a couple of games, and I was just mind blown with everything. I really thought that this was some kind of a weird, a weird cartoon situation here where you were a part of it. And even the boxes, these are kind of similar to VHS tapes. Then what happened? My parents happened. Well, say goodbye, it's time to go. And I was like, well, just let me play another game, but it was getting late, time to go home. Now, guess what the conversation was during the ride back home? I begged my parents for a video game console. And they were like, well, you're too young for that, you have your Legos, the fucking Legos. Maybe in a couple of years, Then next year, it was my first year at the elementary school. And a lot of my friends at school, they had video game consoles. Their older brothers had consoles. So usually, in sleepovers and at birthday parties, it was a time where I was introduced to the whole gaming scene. I discovered more stuff about the Mega Drive, I discovered the Super Nintendo, I discovered the Game Boy, I discovered a bunch of games, a bunch of experiences, a bunch of options. So I usually played at friends' house on their consoles, and sometimes I would play a little bit of Game Boy and Game Gear on school on their consoles. And video games were expensive. Back in the day, they really were. I mean, to get a Sega Mega Drive back in the day, it was more expensive than getting a PS4 Pro nowadays. But eventually my parents gave me the PS1. When it was released, I got the PS1, and that's the system that I grew up with. But looking back, I don't regret anything. I really look back at my childhood, and it was a very happy one. I have really good memories, especially with video games. And video games have always been with me, I'm a huge Sony fan, I'm a huge PlayStation fan. I got a PS2 when it was released. I got a Nintendo 64 at the very end of the Nintendo 64 lifespan. I also got a Game Boy. But then, 2006, around that time I was 18, during the PS3 era, I was just a little bit disappointed with gaming. And it is not that I just play retro video games. I mean, I love modern stuff. I love my PS4, I love the Nintendo Switch, but at that time I felt that something was missing. The games looked more beautiful than ever, amazing graphics, but you know, I was missing the simplicity. Then of course DLCs came, and that was the time when I wanted to go back and play the video games that I grew up with. And my father, he was very active on eBay at that time. And even on eBay, you could find good deals for retro video games. So I went online, I went to a lot of forums, and this was way before, you know, the boom of Facebook or YouTube. So in these forums I was looking for, you know, the games that I used to play with my friends as a kid. Then I found a very good lot on eBay with a Sega Mega Drive. This baby right here. This Mega Drive right here. Completed in box, 2 controllers, the Mega Games 2, and plus more 10 games, I think. It was around 12 or 13 games in total. And it was cheap. It was dirt cheap. And the reason why I picked this one right here. I know that a lot of people don't like this version of the Mega Drive, but I wanted to have a console just like the one that I played on my first time. And I've played a lot of this machine right here. And that really opened a lot of doors for me. I rediscovered the Super Nintendo, the Game Gear. I discovered about stuff that I didn't know that existed. You know, stuff like the Atari, the NES, the ZX Spectrum, and the rest of it, well, the rest is history. This was my story, guys. The story of how I became a gamer. And I would like to hear yours. Feel free to share your stories in the comment section below, guys. Do you guys remember the first time that you've played a video game? Do you remember the machine it was? Do you remember the game it was? Was it on the arcades? Was it on a 8-bit computer? Let me know. Share your story in the comment section below. And thank you so much for listening to mine. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to put a like on this video. Please subscribe to the channel and take care of yourselves, take care of the gaming community, and game a lot.